Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to dive right into the tangled web of recent military strikes between Iran, the US, and Gulf states. We're not just looking at the kinetic action on the ground, though. We're also unpacking the heavily contradictory reports surrounding the 2026 ceasefire negotiations happening in the background. So if you've been seeing all these fragmented headlines and wondering how, say, a drone strike connects to high-level nuclear diplomacy, you're absolutely in the right place. Let's get into it.
To help structure the chaos a bit, here's our agenda. First, the strike on Kuwait's airport. Second, the Gulf retaliation cycle. Third, our ceasefire talks paused. And finally, the broader regional stakes.
Okay, Section 1, strike on Kuwait's airport.
We really have to begin with the jarring reality of Wednesday's events. An Iranian drone strike severely damaged the T1 passenger building at Kuwait International Airport, which instantly halted all commercial flights. And what makes this incredibly stark is that this airport had just reopened on Monday after months of wartime closures. I mean, barely 2 days later, multiple hostile drones forced an indefinite suspension of the whole operation all over again.
Well, this isn't just about infrastructure damage or delayed flights. Kuwait's foreign ministry actually confirmed that at least one person was killed in this blast, with multiple others sustaining injuries. So this tragic human cost really serves as the anchor to all the complex military maneuvers we're about to discuss.
Moving on to Section 2, the Gulf retaliation cycle.
Now, we're looking at a distinct rapid-fire chain reaction here. Early Tuesday, the U.S. fired a missile into the engine room of an Iranian oil tanker to enforce a blockade. Just hours later, Iran responded, launching missiles and drones toward Kuwait and Bahrain. And the cycle didn't stop there. By late Tuesday, U.S. Central Command launched a counterstrike on an Iranian military ground control station on Kesh Island, which sits right in the highly strategic Strait of Hormuz.
It's super important to look at the intended targets of that Iranian volley. Now, the U.S. military reported that the two missiles fired at Kuwait actually fell apart en route, while U.S. and Bahraini forces successfully intercepted the missiles and downed multiple drones aimed at Bahrain and American forces. But in a remarkably bold claim, Iran's paramilitary Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, stated explicitly that their intended target was the headquarters of the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet in Bahrain.
And Iran's military offered a very direct justification for this. They framed their strike not as unprovoked, but as a severe, promised response to that U.S. missile strike on their tanker that was attempting to bypass the blockade. It's really a classic, high-stakes, tit-for-tat escalation playing out in real time.
Which brings us to Section 3. Are ceasefire talks paused?
Okay, so we have to impartially contrast these conflicting claims because they paint two entirely different pictures of global diplomacy right now. On one hand, Iranian media, specifically agencies believed to be close to the IRGC, and an anonymous regional official are reporting that Tehran has entirely stopped communicating with ceasefire mediators. Their main condition? A ceasefire must first be enforced in Lebanon before negotiations can continue. But, on the flip side, U.S. President Donald Trump publicly disputed this, labeling the reports of a pause as false and erroneous, and insisting that talks are very much ongoing.
And just to give you the exact wording here from a social media post, President Trump stated that the conversations have been going on continuously. He actually listed off the past several days to really emphasize the point. He ended the statement by saying, "Where they lead, one never knows. But as I told Iran, it's time, one way or another, for you to make a deal." So this forcefully reinforces the U.S. administration's stance that negotiations are actively pushing forward, seemingly undeterred by the military exchanges we just talked about.
Let's zoom out for Section 4, the broader regional stakes.
You see, you really can't view the Kuwait airport strike in a vacuum. There are massive, interlocking, macro-level stakes at play here. First, you have the broadening Israel-Hezbollah war in Lebanon, which Iran ties directly to the progress of the ceasefire talks. Second, there's immense global economic pressure, as the U.S. attempts to loosen the Islamic Republic's grip on the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, that is a vital maritime choke point for global oil, gas, and commodities. And finally, overarching this whole situation, the nuclear dimension.
Adding a layer of nuance to those massive stakes, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently testified at a congressional hearing. Interestingly, he chose not to address the disputed cutoff in communications directly. Instead, he highlighted a sense of optimism specifically regarding the nuclear dimension of the ongoing negotiations. However, he carefully cautioned that there is absolutely no guarantee of reaching a deal that is deemed acceptable. It's a stark reminder of the monumental long-term implications that underline every single drone strike and diplomatic back channel happening right now.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, we're left with a really difficult question. Amidst this fragile web of deadly drone strikes, targeted fleets, and completely contradictory reports on peace talks, which force will ultimately dictate the future of this region? Will it be the hard power of military deterrence or the fraught, complex process of diplomacy? The coming days will undoubtedly provide the answer. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack all this and keep seeking clarity in the chaos.